podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello there, Rich Ferraro here, and thank you for listening to this 1865 Podcast Extra. Now, if you'd listened to our end of season show, you'll have heard that we had interviews with Mark Dennison of BBC Radio Nottingham, who is also the City Ground Stadium announcer, and also Forest fan and football journalist Nick Miller. Now, those were shortened versions of those interviews, so in this Podcast Extra we're delighted to bring you the full interviews. Let's start off with Mark Dennison. Now it's time for something very special. We're going to go to a stalwart of BBC Radio Nottingham, but most importantly, the man who is the City Ground Stadium announcer, Mr. Mark Dennison. Denno, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And hearing you say those words is still like, I don't know, it's still dawning on me, to be honest. But yeah, wow, that's all I can say.
That brings me to exactly where I was going to start, which was, how was Wembley for you?
It was immense. I mean, yeah, I mean, basically the story with that is that years ago, and I hate to, well, we can talk about it now because there's no jinx, is there? Years ago with Yeovil and the playoffs then, and we know what happened. But basically, I was put on standby then to go to Wembley and to, you know, I remember Mark Arthur at the time saying, look, we get to Wembley, the deal is that they get the announcer on from each team and you do a little bit. And I was thinking, wow, that sounds really exciting. Then we know what happened, and that was a long time ago. And then when we knew we were in the playoffs after the Sheffield United semi-final, all of a sudden I started thinking about, oh yeah, there's that thing at Wembley again. And it hadn't crossed my mind before that. And yeah, I mean, it's just, the whole day was just incredible and a blur, and definitely a real, not just career, but life highlight.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And of course, for many fans who didn't have the same proximity to everything that was going on as you did, look, we've seen all the Vox Pops, haven't we? And all the fans saying, it's the best day of my life, and not just the ones who've never experienced success as a Forest supporter, even some of my generation and the older generation as well. Loads of people saying it's one of the best days. Now, for you, you had a really, really long day, didn't you? Because you were broadcasting on the early shift. We saw you on the big screen, all suited and booted. Be honest with me, were you nervous before that day?
Oh, I was bricking it. I was absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. And that was part of it. But in some ways, looking back, I was quite pleased it was a really busy day. So in my day job, yeah, I work for BBC Radio Nottingham. So they already had a plan of doing some outside broadcast from London. I'd already said I'll be up for that. But knowing that I'd have the announcing thing to work around as well. But it worked out perfectly, really. So I was on air 8 till 11. So it was an early start. We started just up the road from Wembley and then walked down to Wembley Way. Finished at 11 by the famous steps up to the stadium. And then I literally went in, had to get my pass, and I had to have like a rehearsal. I can't remember the last time I rehearsed anything at the City Ground, but there we are. People can probably tell. And went in, and it was actually really nice because after all of that, it was already noisy outside, and it was busy being on air for 3 hours. And I went into Wembley and it was all quite quiet, and they were setting things up, and it just gave me a bit of time to wander around and get my bearings and get my head around what I was going to be doing. And then we had a rehearsal. The woman at Wembley said, when you finish your bit, when you've announced the teams, do you want to do a piece to camera? And I said, well, can do, you know, can do if you want. It's different language. So it was just, you know, it was just like that. And the rest of it was just, I then had a bit of time to kill before I went back and did the thing for real. But yeah, it was just amazing.
And by the way, just very quickly, was it your choice to wear a suit and tie, or was it someone else's?
My choice. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you look the part. If you can't dress up for one of the biggest days of your career, then when can you? I guess.
Well, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, going back to the City Ground, your job as stadium announcer, you have been doing it for a long time, but just thinking about over the last few years, it must feel very different doing it now compared to the years BC before Cooper.
BC, I love that. Yeah, it does. And I think we've talked before about it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. So, yeah, my job is to do the teams and to kind of help build the atmosphere along with everything else going on musically and on the screens. But let's be honest, during the dark days, there's only so much building up you can do before the crowd start thinking, we all know we're not really building up to very much, are we? So you've got to play there's a delicate kind of balance to be struck there. Whereas since October last year, and certainly since the turn of the calendar year, it's just been so different. And everyone could see what massive progress there was. I think, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but it felt like something was brewing. And I was telling myself that, and in fact, I was telling myself out loud, if it doesn't happen this season, next season is going to be really, really exciting because I know that he and they would go for it. So I'd kind of talked myself into that just kind of to prepare myself because, we were bottom in September and we've just gone up and, that is nothing short of miraculous.
Yeah, upward trajectory all the way. I think there's only been 1 or 2 weeks in the entire season when the team have ended up, since Cooper's come in, where the team have ended up going down in the league over the course of a game week. And of course, just very quickly, you were also broadcasting for Radio Nottingham from the council house, and you've shared with us that you did a lot of it lying on your belly next to a speaker, which is a really dignified. One day Wembley, the next day lying on your belly underneath and behind a balcony.
It's yesterday was all a blur. So we knew that the team and the backroom staff and management. To be honest, I didn't know that everyone was going to be there from Forest, but to see and hear the owner was quite amazing because I thought his speech was really, really interesting. So I mean, we were outside. We were in the Old Market Square at lunchtime, and we thought, well, this is just getting noisier and noisier. And I was standing inside the doors of the council house, saw someone from Forest who very kindly said, just come up. And so we did, me, producer and engineer. But then when the Matt and Colin were doing all of the introductions and everything, we needed to hear it. And there was a speaker on the floor of the balcony. So there are all these journalists and camera crew up there on the balcony. And there's me thinking, well, the only way we can get the sound from the speaker is for me to lie down with my microphone. It was so untechnical. It's the year 2022, but it was the only way to make it work for the radio. And there I was on my belly. Almost got trod on by Cafu and Samba a couple of times. But I mean, again, just to be up there, and to soak up the atmosphere, it was just amazing, and you could see what it meant to players and all the coaching staff and the people from behind the scenes. And I think that's the thing for me. There are an awful lot of people that often go under the radar, and it's their day as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying on the way out, look, we don't know who half those people were who were out on the pitch when they were parading the trophy and having the ticker tape, but that doesn't mean that they haven't played an important role in the club. I just want to finish off by talking about not you, actually, but one of your colleagues. So you obviously got to have your big day out at Wembley, but the ever-modest Colin Fray, he finally got to commentate on his beloved Reds at the National Stadium, and he's going to do so in the Premier League next year. Now, obviously, we know him as our commentator, you know him as a colleague as well. Have you got any words for the legend that is Colin Fray?
Yes, I do. And by the way, you look like a Bond villain with your cat.
Yes. So for the listeners' benefit, the 1865 podcast has now made an appearance and is currently trying to climb up my arms. So.
Is the cat asking for a season ticket? Because I've got no influence on that. Colin is just such a lovely guy. As you said, he is modest. He, as a commentator, he manages to keep things. I know, obviously, when Forest score, that's off the scale. But he has a calmness about him. He has that professional kind of steel. I saw him on Sunday at Wembley beforehand. We shared a bit of a moment then. We definitely shared a moment yesterday at the Council House, actually. And I know how much this means to him as well. And he was up there, obviously, yesterday doing all of the introductions to the players and the staff. And he's just having the time of his life. And it could not happen to a nicer guy. And I genuinely mean that. He's, local radio quite often doesn't get the recognition it deserves, but Colin is getting it now. He's sharing in this limelight, and rightly so.
And with all due respect to Lawsey and Steve Sutton as well, I genuinely don't think there can be a better commentary team on local radio than Colin with Steve Hodge. It's just an absolute joy to listen to, and always has been, but this season in particular, it's what a delight. Yeah. They're amazing. And, I think Colin mentioned yesterday to me, we did a bit for the radio, and he was talking about, the fact that Forest are now going to be a match of the day. Mm-hmm. And it's things like this. When people mention something like that, you think, oh, yeah. It hadn't kind of landed with me. But after he said it, I thought, yeah, but whoever they get for match of the day, again, with greatest respect, is not going to be a patch on you, Colin, and your colleagues. So, yeah, I'm really chuffed for him, and he's waited a long time, and a lot of us have waited a long time for Wembley, but Colin in particular. So, it's just it's a good time for the club, but I think for this area, yeah, and I can't wait to see what it does for the city and the county as a whole. I think it's brilliant. Yeah. Just as a footnote, by the way, at the Council House, I'm sure that you and your production team and Colin himself, even though he wasn't officially on Radio Nottingham duties, he must have been delighted that Steve Cook didn't get the memo about no swearing.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, cheers, Steve. Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I mean, we put out several kind of warnings beforehand and apologised a couple of times after. Yeah, I think most people recognise it's live. People are very excited. They're in high spirits. So we had, I think we got away with, there was that. There was one other little slip that someone else made, and which was not the same word. But it's one of those things. I think these days, as long as you say sorry, I don't like it. I mean, blimey, the One Show will apologise about 15 times for someone saying ruddy or something. I mean, really. So I think the more you apologise, sometimes the worse you can make it. But yeah. It's one of those things. And Cookie is, he's already a legend, isn't he? He's only been here a few months.
Oh, absolutely. And there are so many photos of him celebrating. Okay, thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for this.
Sports fans, come experience the FanDuel Sportsbook at Live Casino and Hotel for all your sports betting action. The ultimate place for any sports enthusiast. Take advantage of our 24/7 kiosks, massive video screens, and watch all the action from the best seat in the house. Make every moment more at the all-new FanDuel Sportsbook at Live Casino and Hotel in Hanover, Maryland. Please play responsibly. Gambling problem? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit mdgamblinghelp.org.
We're going to have a chat with a Forest fan and football journalist, Mr. Nick Miller. Hello, Nick. Thanks for joining us again.
Hello, no problem.
It's been a while since we've spoken to you, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But you were at Wembley on Sunday. Look, we're of similar vintage. You're a little bit younger than me, but was this the greatest day of your life as a Forest fan?
Yeah, I mean, without any question, it's just the time building up to it, the kind of, you don't want to be too kind of, well, I was at Doncaster in 2007, so I deserve this. But I think we'd all done the hard yards for this. We just we'd done our time, and we'd built up enough sort of years of disappointment and frustration to make this one of the, well, yeah, as you say, the sweetest moment of my Forest supporting life. Anyway, I've written a piece about this, but there was in 1920 when obviously it looked like we were going to be in the playoffs and we decent, as good a chance of getting promoted as any. Then lockdown came in and it became clear that if we were going to get to the playoff final, then it would be behind closed doors and no one would be able to be there. I lost enthusiasm for the whole prospect of Forest getting promoted, because what I wanted was to be there, to be at a game, to have the kind of broader collective experience with all those other Forest fans, but also to be there with my mum and dad, who I've been going to Forest with since I was 5. And obviously, if I wasn't going to be able to get that, then I wasn't so enthused. I wasn't even as enthused a few weeks ago when there was the tantalising prospect of us going up automatically, because I knew that was going to, if that was going to happen, then the big kind of tense games at Bournemouth, I could get a ticket for that, and if we'd won that, then the game would have been a hole, and I couldn't get a ticket for that either. So. The prospect of Forest getting promoted after all these years without me actually being there it would have taken the edge off. But it happened, and it happened it didn't. I mean, it sounds stupid to say that it happened in the most perfect way, considering what a dog of a game it was, and it was decided by an own goal, and we were lucky to get away with a couple of penalties and all this kind of thing. But it was perfect.
Yeah, and having said that, I mean, automatic promotion would have been better for the blood pressure and the heart rate, wouldn't it? So,
yeah. I mean, all logical, like just simply for the fact that you have an extra 2-3 weeks to prepare for next season, and as you say, better for the blood pressure and the heart rate, and I don't know, in terms of prestige or something like that, probably better to go up automatically. But no, I prefer this one.
Yeah, wouldn't have swapped the day for anything in the end. Now, you mentioned about the fact that you are a football writer, and due to your job, it's sometimes difficult for you to get to matches. But you also talked about the fact that even if last time we were in with a sniff before it all went wrong, that there weren't any fans at matches anyway. And one of the key features of this season has been the City ground has been an absolute cauldron. And even Wembley, the further the match went on, the less I could hear the Huddersfield fans, and the more that and some of the footage, I mean, having been in it, and then you watch the footage back from outside, where you just realise it was a great big party for 45 minutes when the final whistle went. I've asked the question to our other podcast panelists over the last few days, but how was it for you?
Well, the final, you mentioned not being able to hear the Huddersfield fans. Our seats were probably 15 yards away from the Huddersfield fans. We were right at the edge of the Forest allocation, and we couldn't hear them either. So, obviously when you're in the middle of all that stuff, then the noise kind of overtakes it a bit, but they seem to, they might as well not have been there for all weekend. Christ, yeah. I mean, at the final whistle, so my seat was in the row immediately behind my mum and dad, who, as I said, I've been going with for 34 years now, almost. And at the final whistle, I just first thing I did was kind of try and clamber down over the seats to get so I could stand with them. Gave them a big hug and just burst into tears. It was, I even now we're recording this on Thursday, 4 days after the game, and I'm still sort of welling up and getting quite emotional about just watching the new bit. I see new bits of film or pictures. How YouTube algorithms work. Whenever I go on YouTube now, there's a new like fan reaction or alternative angle or Fuzz Garibaldi made a film about the day, and that went up yesterday. So every time I go on YouTube, which is quite a lot these last few days, a new thing comes up, and it's a new thing for me to just get a little bit emotional about. But yeah, that kind of moment at the final whistle, and as you say, the half an hour, 45 minutes afterwards was incredible.
And also, it's really, really important that the fans have been acknowledged by the manager and the players, and particularly the Nottingham-based players who've been through the ringer. The Worrells and the Yateses who've taken pelters, and they've been there. And as Wazza said in his Sky interview, we were so that it was. And Forest, I still believe. Okay, a lot went wrong under Sabri, but I still believe that the fans not being there was part of that. It not going well. So just to move on from there, put your journalist hat on for just 1 second, please, Nick. There have been accusations from elsewhere, including Huddersfield fans, that there's been a bit of a media bias towards Forest. I think Bournemouth fans might have said the same in the latter part of the season. That kind of people referring to the romanticism of the past under Clark in the 90s and Clough in the 70s, 80s and 90s. So have your fellow journalists been particularly nice to you in the last few months? And do you think people are genuinely pleased to see Forest get promoted?
Yeah, I mean, particularly as a lot of the more I said, like the more influential journalists and editors are of our age, so they remember Forest. If they don't remember the real glory days, then they remember, as you say, Clark and Collymore and Bohinen and all on that team going into Europe. And Forest are very much viewed as a top flight club in all but name for a certain generation, and they are the generation that kind of makes all the decisions in the media. So I suppose there is that. I think the simple answer to whether there has been a bias towards Forest. There has, I think. I mean, without wishing to fuel the paranoia of these people, there has been, I think, but not in a kind of, they because they inherently hate Bournemouth or Huddersfield or whoever it is. It's just because Forest is a more interesting story. It's a much more interesting story. Even if you would discount the kind of the history and Clough and whatever else, it's a team that has not been in the top flight for 23 years, and in those specific examples, I got up against a team who've been in the Premier League in the last 4 or 5 years. So, and it's much more interesting than Bournemouth or Fulham getting automatically promoted. It would have been more interesting than Sheffield United getting promoted. And so journalists tend to be biased towards good stories rather than, in particular teams. And, this is a tremendous story, even if even if you discount the history and just look at it as a team who were bottom of the league after 7 games, 1 point from those, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was our Forest worst start in 108 years or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so even that's just a more interesting story than everything else. Mm-hmm. So there probably almost certainly was more coverage dedicated to Forest than the others, but that's because it's just a more interesting story.
And I think that generational factor you consider, because obviously at the times that, people of yours and my age were getting into football as well, Forest were going to Wembley most years. We were the 3rd best team in the country. And you know what? I think we were a lot of people's second team, if such a thing exists. And maybe that doesn't exist so much anymore. But again, because of the generational factor, I think a lot of people carry that with.
Yeah, you'll often, I'm sure you've heard this as well, you'll often hear of maybe people our age, maybe a bit younger, that support Forest because their parents, their dad, one of their parents supported Forest, but they'd be from Basingstoke or Middlesbrough or something like that, and they will say, "Well, why do you? What's the connection there? Why do you support Forest?" and they will say, "Oh, my dad started supporting Forest in the 70s because of Brian Clough, because everyone loved Forest, everyone loved that brilliant story and the way Forest played football and Clough's personality." So yeah, it is a slightly strange generational thing, but a generational thing that's kind of passed down.
Yeah, and just lastly for today, and thank you once again for joining us, Nick. Now I did say we'd come back to this. I think the last time we spoke to you was the morning after Ashton Gate. You had been there at work as a neutral, ostensibly, apparently, when Lyle Taylor scored 2 goals in stoppage time. And we spoke to you when you'd had, I think, 3 hours sleep. You'd driven home through a howling rainstorm. You'd had an adrenaline high. You'd had to kind of hold it together in the press box rather than jumping up and down. Was that the turning point of the season?
It's always kind of difficult to. Well, it's always very easy, I should say, to like retrospectively apply the undue significance to games like that. But it did. There was something there that you just felt, there's something different here. There's something different about it. It was not quite so much how that Forest scored 2 goals in injury time. But it was more the way that they kind of approached that they didn't. I read back what I wrote about that game for something else in the last couple of days, and it was really striking how they didn't panic in that game. They didn't they didn't stick Scott McKenna up front and just started launching it, which even the best teams do that. They just kept playing. There was tactical changes. There were 3 substitutions. All 3 substitutes were involved in the second goal, but they kept playing as they had been. Other journalists that cover Forest more regular than me, I think, have been. I don't know, frustrated is quite the right word, but every interview that Steve Cooper gives, it is something along the lines of, trust the process, 1 game at a time, blah, 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 blah. But the whole kind of the idea of trusting the plan and trusting the process is what happened in that Bristol City game. And that was what I think it was 5th game, 4 wins in a row. I kind of almost think that I think it was the following game where we got beat 4-0 by Fulham. I felt like it was a bit of a kind of reality check game. It's like, okay, well, we've won these 4 games, but let's not get giddy about this, and let's temper our expectations. Let's not get too excited about these 4 wins. We know that no miracles are going to happen this season. Nothing extraordinary is going to happen. We'll probably, if we're lucky, we'll finish in the top half and build for the following season. So I would possibly say that the games after that Fulham game, where I can't remember who it was against, but I think we drew another one where we scored in the last minute, and then won a few games after that. I think it was probably almost those games where it was, post that reality check, post getting absolutely gubbed by the best team in the division, and they just kind of came back from that and just carried on winning until May.
Yeah, and of course, I guess there was a certain romanticism about that. Like the fact it's happening in pouring rain, wearing the high-vis kit with Taylor with his pink hair and pink boots, and the celebrations and everything. So I can understand that. So thank you very much, Nick. Where can people find your work?
You can find my work on The Athletic. I'm on social media, Nick Miller 79. And they will also be able to find my work in a few months' time. I'm currently editing the Totally Football Yearbook, which will be out, I think, in October. Pre-order links will be available soon, and when they are, I'll put them on my social media. So, that's where you can find my work. If you look at my author page on The Athletic, there was a piece about. There's lots of Forest content in the last week or so. One in particular I wrote a piece about being there on Sunday. And kind of what it meant and everything else. So I'm sure it's something that a lot of people out there will be able to identify with.
Thank you so much to Mark and Nick for giving up their valuable time and joining us on the podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening to the full version of these interviews, and we also hope that you've enjoyed our podcasting throughout the season. Whether you're a new listener or you've been with us for a while, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a little bit of time to leave a review of our podcast, hopefully give us a good rating and a nice comment as well, and this will help other Forest fans and other football fans to find our podcast. We have got one other podcast which will come up before the summer, and that is going to be our end of season Premier League quiz. So do stay tuned and we will be with you very soon.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
When it comes to wardrobe staples, the things that feel as good as they look are what we wear again and again. But finding those perfect closet additions can be tough, especially in the shoe department. Unless you're shopping at Rothy's and their sustainably made, machine-washable shoes that are built to last because they knit both style and comfort into every pair. The Rothy's signature sneaker combines game-changing comfort with a tirelessly cool look, so it goes with every outfit, from casual to elevated. And their one-of-a-kind driving loafers feel great with or without socks and come in classic colors and eye-catching patterns. Forget about the break-in periods you expect from other shoes. The soft, flexible materials and wildly comfortable Rothy's insoles make their shoes one of the most wearable right out of the box. Find out what the hype is all about. Discover your new favorite pair of shoes and get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/hype. That's ROTHYS.com/hype.